You are here at an event we're calling Nevada Powered by the Sun. I know that's true because it's in my cell phone. Okay, that's how I know something's right, if it's in my cell phone. I don't have to look at my cell phone to tell you who I am. I'm Robert Lang. I'm director of Brookings Mountain West at UNLV. I'm also a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution back in Washington. And I'm also a professor of public affairs at the Greenspun College of Urban Affairs, which is where you are right now. And the host to this event, the dual hosts, are Brookings Mountain West and the Greenspun College. And Dean Ulmer's somewhere out in the audience. I know he's out there. You can barely see with the bright lights on. He wanted me to say something about the college, too, to make sure you know our mission. So I'm in public affairs. And by the way, I have to say that a lot around Southern Nevada. I have to say, you're going to want to yell at me because I'm in public affairs. And when you're in public affairs, you say things, especially when you're college faculty, they let us out of the zoo occasionally. And when we get out of the zoo, we say all kinds of crazy things, you know, like maybe you want to look at solar, and because it's pouring down on us continuously. What, you know, as a point of reference, I don't know if you could detect by my idiomatic speech pattern, but I'm from New Jersey and New York. And there you go. There's always somebody out there for you. And I went to the State University, which is Rutgers University there, and I'm always shocked when I go back. There's solar everywhere at Rutgers University. Everywhere. And it was never sunny the whole time I was an undergrad. It rained continuously. The 1 hour of sunlight, they have enough to generate enough electricity to run Rutgers University practically. So, I find it dismaying that here I am in this state, and there's sunlight pouring down. I had to get out of cloud cover. I had to get out of Jersey. You know, I know Tom's from that neck of the woods over there. Tom Kaplan, a good friend of ours, Wolfgang Puck, and I had to get out of that. And I got out here, and I'm in the sunshine, and then we're not capturing the sunshine, and much to my dismay, because in 2011 I was participant in a project that was developed a state economic development plan. It's called Unify, Regionalize, Diversify, and it is the agenda that the state adopted, and GoEd is in there, and all of the sort of modern structure, the modern architecture that has been so successful this state, that helped land firms like Tesla and Faraday, that has helped transform the state. In that report, we identified 7 clusters, and these are the clusters that we thought were the places that the state either was succeeding in, like tourism is the first cluster, and that you could still diversify within that core cluster of tourism. But also there were these areas of opportunity, healthcare, and one of the key ones, and one of the ones we really pushed, and the governor asked me and Mark Muro, one of the co-authors, the other author here is SRI on this report. They provide a lot of the data. The governor said, and this is in late 2011, this is November of 2011, so tell me, if you really had to push one of the key areas, what do you think we have opportunity in? And both Mark and I said, number 4, clean energy. In other words, this is in the plan. This is in the state economic development plan. And clean energy means what you think it means. It means everything from geothermal, which is especially concentrated in the north, to solar, which is where we have most of our play for renewable energy. And we said it for a few key reasons. One of the reasons was we don't have oil and gas in the state. So for electric generation, for power and utility, we need to import raw material. And in state terms, that's wealth defeating. If you can generate something within a state, like if you have enormous solar potential, and you can generate that within the state, one of our arguments was something that we have been importing is something that could go to an export. Not only could it go to export, not only are we cleaner, not only is our air quality better, not only do we have more people employed, we can also manufacture the technology associated with it, because places that become venues for the mass production of something like an energy source like solar are also locations where you would see opportunities and plays within manufacturing. So we thought this was virtuous at all levels. And most recently, released just today, my colleague Mark Muro did Rooftop Solar Net Metering is a Net Benefit, which is a quick survey and a short piece that he did in preparation for this event. Just to let you know, this is out in the lobby, if it's also online, and it was reported on in today's papers. But we're going to go a little further. We didn't have it ready for preparation for this event, but Brookings Mountain West has commissioned a small study to drill down within states and look at the multiple criteria that those states used in decision-making that was information-based decision-making to create net metering and to set rates. And so look for that later in the summer, because this is going to be an ongoing debate. I think it's important to the state's future. It's important that this college be a forum for these events, because this is sort of an indispensable school in that way. Without a college of public affairs, without a sort of outreach part of the university like this that's looking for economic development, that's looking to do good governance, that's looking to assist the state, the state would have, I think, worse decision making. It wouldn't have had, for example, the State Economic Development Report, which was really originated. The fortunate thing is that's originated within the state. The state had the capacity in-house to do an analysis that gave it a platform that led it to conclude, rightfully so, that alternate energy, that clean energy was one of its greatest opportunities. And I don't think anything's changed. That report is 5 years old. The only thing that's changed is it's more important to do this today than it was then. It's a better play than it is today than it was then. Everything associated with that has been an improvement. So I don't want to take any more time. I'll just let John come to the stage. Thanks for coming out. We appreciate you being here. John.
Thank you, Robin. It's great to be here. It's great to be back in Las Vegas. I actually lived in Las Vegas for 18 years. Some of you who know me, I think a lot of you do. Spent 7 years in Washington, D.C., 7 as a commissioner for the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and 4.5 of those years as chairman of the commission. It's good to be out of D.C. I hope I never have to go back again, actually, to tell you the truth. But it's wonderful, though, to be in sunny Las Vegas and to be here to talk about this subject. I think a very important subject, and that is how we can bring back solar and solar choice. And we have a very important report to talk about. And so, as Rob was my warm-up act, I'm really the warm-up act for the main event here that we'll get to in a few minutes after I go through a couple slides on the future of energy in this country and sort of my view of the future of energy. But then we're going to talk about, I think, the core thing here is a report that's going to show that there are net benefits from solar, from doing net metering in Nevada. And we're going to show that some of the data that you've seen out there in TV ads and other things is not quite accurate, that it's incomplete. And we've completed it. We've completed the study. So we're going to get to that in a few minutes. But first I want to do a few thank yous. I certainly want to thank the Greenspun family for their great philanthropy and what they've done here at UNLV. And of course, I want to thank UNLV as well for hosting this. I want to thank Tom Kaplan. Also want to thank Senator Mo Dennis. Actually, Mo and I worked together at one time at the PUC, little known fact. And we've gone off to do a lot of things since then. I also want to thank the Brookings West folks and Tom Perigo with the City of Las Vegas, John Orsiaga, and Marcus Conklin, and representatives from the Senate Minority Leader, Harry Reid, and Congressman Dina Titus. I want to thank all of you, and I want to thank everybody from coming. We have a standing room only here. So, getting to my presentation, let's move on to the future of energy and the way I see energy. And is my mic working? Because I like to walk around a little bit when I do these. And when I got to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, it's interesting that for some reason people like to hear me talk. So I actually got the opportunity to talk quite a bit and do quite a few presentations. And so I like to kind of walk a little bit. So if we want to look at the future of energy, the only way you can look at the future is look at where you've been. And where we've been is ultimately places like this. This is Reed Gardner Power Plant out in Moapa. It served us well for this community, a coal-fired power plant. But we've come to find out that there's lots of reasons why this kind of resource is not something that we need to look at in the future. And those reasons include things like, utility investments right now are encouraged to overinvest because they make a profit simply by how much money they put into their investments. And that's really not a very efficient way to deliver energy services. So we need to look at more efficient ways to do that. We also need to consider such things as the huge amounts of water that these kinds of facilities use, and certainly any kind of a fossil power plant or a nuclear power plant, any of these thermal generating facilities use tremendous amounts of water, and certainly for this community we know how important that is to reduce that water use. And then the majority of power still does come from fossil fuels. That's changing. And it just changed over a couple of years ago where actually there's less generation now from coal than there is from natural gas. And natural gas, of course, puts out fewer greenhouse gases than coal does, but still substantial amounts of greenhouse gases. And there's lots of questions about natural gas from the production, from the wellhead all the way to the power plant, with methane leaks, with methane being a much more intense greenhouse gas by factor of 10 or 15 more than carbon dioxide, that we may have to reduce the use of natural gas as well. And we're seeing that with the things like Aliso Canyon in California, in Southern California, was actually one of the largest emissions of methane that we've ever seen, single sources emissions of methane that we've ever seen, and a huge greenhouse gas problem. And then finally, centralized power is prone to centralized outages, and we have this issue of reliability, and we have this issue of these large central systems that are very, very dependent on a very few nodes of the system, that those nodes can be subject to outages from a standpoint of wildfires, and outages from a standpoint of other weather events, can also be subject to outages from a standpoint of physical attacks or cybersecurity. Things that I looked at very carefully when I was at FERC, and determined ultimately that we have a system that can be very vulnerable to these types of things. And to the extent that we can put in more distributed energy in more places in the country, ultimately the result is we have a much more robust system. We have a much stronger system. If you can imagine, if you have ultimately, in Nevada, for example, 10 points of vulnerability versus having thousands or hundreds of thousands of points of vulnerability, how you change the reliability of the system overall. We also have to look at down at the distributed level. This is a distribution system here that you can see how that operates ultimately. And ultimately, this is one that is not very modern ultimately. There's Elon Musk. He's coming. He just drove into the picture. Well, let's keep that Tesla there for just a second, and let's look at that distribution system behind it. That's a substation that is in your neighborhood, that's providing to the circuits in where you're having power distributed to you. And you can imagine that system, it's very antiquated from a standpoint of communications, from a standpoint of digital upgrades, etc. Compare that to the car. Compare that to a Tesla, compare that to any automobile currently, and the sophisticated communications and control equipment that are in those automobiles, the computer systems that are in those automobiles, and how advanced they are based upon the competition that we have in the automobile industry versus the lack of advancements that we see in the distribution system. We really need to advance that distribution system to be a much more robust and much more modern system, to be based upon digital technology in ways that we can all take advantage of it, and we can incorporate the choices into our homes and businesses in ways that will help us control our costs. And that can't be done unless we can figure out how to better modernize that distribution system. So it's not just that central generation that we got to worry about and look at more distributed generation, but also it's a matter of looking at the distribution system and how we can modernize that as well. So if we look at the future of energy, ultimately we need to have better consumer choices. We ultimately have to have the ability for consumers to have choice on their side of the meter, things like solar generation. Things like storage, battery storage is becoming very popular now, and I'll show you some of that in a moment. Also, things like controlling the operation of the systems in your house, the Nest thermostat, other controllable thermostats that you can do on your phone now, controlling other appliances, water heaters, dishwashers, other things that ultimately allow you to ensure that your energy costs can be controlled. We need those consumer choices. We need more accessible and cleaner energy resources as well. And we also need to look at the ability to have, lower greenhouse gases. We do have, a significant problem in this world that we've got to address. Ultimately, the problem of climate change, and that problem can only be addressed by individual choices, and individual choices can only happen if you have access to those choices and have access to be able to choose cleaner energy. And we have to have more controllable and affordable costs. We can't do this at any cost. because we can't afford it ultimately. But I think there's ways to do it more efficiently at a controllable or potentially even less cost. And the cost of renewables is coming down dramatically. It's come down very dramatically, and ultimately we're going to see those costs continue to come down. One way for those choices is at larger systems, but here's an example of a larger system, a central system that is a renewable system. This is one that Solar City did on the island of Kauai, in the Kauai Electric Cooperative, where we put in a large array of solar panels, and with that put in battery storage that ultimately allows that cooperative to utilize that system to control their grid and to use that energy not only during the peak times during the day where the sun is out, but with the storage to use it to shift it over to times when they have usage when the sun isn't shining as well. So ultimately these systems can work, and they can work at the larger scale. But let's look at some of the smaller scale systems. But again, in those smaller scale systems, we have to look at how we've transitioned in this country through a number of systems over the years. One is communications, and obviously, you know, we've got a telephone on the right. That thing on the left is not a telephone anymore. It does everything for you. Ultimately, it provides messages and communication of all kinds to you. It can be a camera, it can be a light, it can be, you know, just about anything you need it to be. And it's a transition that's gone through consumer choice. We've done the same thing with entertainment, where we've gone through, you know, the VCR, and we've gone, you know, way beyond that. We've also had this similar transitions in transportation, although the taxis may not agree with it, but ultimately it gives us more choices. It gives us the ability to look at those choices. And finally, even in purchasing, and here with the Zappos in Las Vegas, the way we buy shoes has changed. And all these things have changed radically, but yet we haven't really changed the way that we procure electricity, and we need to make those changes, and make those changes in significant ways. And the ways we can do that are giving consumers choices like things like storage. Here you see the Tesla battery, and also things like controllable thermostats, so you can control the heating and cooling in your house. And of course, the cooling loads in Las Vegas are very significant and things that we have to be concerned about. And if you can't have full control of that system overall, you're ultimately going to waste energy. You're going to waste significant amounts of energy. But if you have that control, and I have a system now where I can, you know, on my phone, I can turn off my thermostat in Berkeley. Sometimes my wife and children don't like that so much, but ultimately, you know, I can do that while I'm in New York City if I think they're using too much energy. So, so you know, you have now the capability of this kind of control, and we should be able to spread that. Also, transportation, moving to transportation from gasoline-powered, fossil fuel-powered systems, and moving that to electric systems will help us actually balance out the electric system, because you can set up controls so that you can charge your electric car at times when the power is at the lowest cost, when there is the least amount of power being used. And if you can do that, we can balance out the system better. And if you can balance out that system better, you can make it much more efficient overall. And then finally, you know, distributing solar through our communities, and doing that in a way that you put all these systems together as a unified system overall. So if we look at historically where we started out with solar, basically the basic panel and a basic inverter, I'd call that phase one. You know, we're almost at the end of phase one of where this is being done across the country, and I believe there's over 600,000 rooftop systems in this country right now. We're moving to what I'd call phase two of the system, where we have not only the panels, but we have what we call advanced inverters. And these are inverters that allow you to have sophisticated operations and control of the system. You can, in essence, dispatch the system. You can do things also like voltage control. You can actually control the voltage there in your local circuit at your particular area. And you can do a number of other things with these advanced inverters that make the system more efficient for the homeowner who has that on the system, but also makes it more efficient for the utility within that circuit as well. So it provides additional benefits, and some of the benefits that my colleague will talk about as soon as I'm done here and we introduce him, and he'll talk about the study that we've done that shows what those benefits are. And then if we go then to sort of version 3.0, which again, the 2.0, we're there now. We can do advanced inverters, and we're moving to 3.0, and we'll be very quickly to 3.0, and we're not far away from 3.0, where you're putting an entire system together. You got not only the solar system, and you've got not only the advanced inverter, but you've got an integration with things like a battery storage and controls on all of your appliances, on all the uses in your house. And all this can work together. And the solar system knows when it's cheaper to use the solar system versus use power from the outside, and vice versa. The battery knows when to store power and when not to store power. And these systems in your house know when to be on and off to ultimately provide you with the ultimate comfort and services that you want at a controllable cost, how to control the costs overall in your home. So if we look at how much solar PV has advanced, you can see the numbers here, how rapidly it's advanced. And this is 3 different types. We have residential rooftop, non-residential rooftop, and utility solar. And you can see how this is scaled, and residential is rapidly increasing, as is the large-scale solar as well. And I'd say that we need both. I'm not assuming that everybody's going to have solar on their house. Not everybody can. Not every commercial building will have solar on their roofs as well. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to provide choice to those consumers that want to have it and determine it's economical and beneficial from them. On the other hand, we are going to have central systems, and those central systems hopefully will be by competitive providers, but they should be available and they should be out there as well to those people that can't choose cleaner, more affordable energy within their own facility, their own house, or their own business. So you can see how this has grown. Let's look at Hawaii, for example, of how this has grown, and this is rooftop solar. This is not the solar that the utility has scaled themselves. And look, from 2010 to 2015, in 5 years, this grew by a factor of 10 with the proper policies. The proper policies in Hawaii valuing that solar at the proper value, providing the benefits to those consumers who put those systems on. You can see how fast and how rapidly these kinds of systems and how much adoption there is and how much choice there was by consumers in Hawaii because of proper policies to ensure that solar can move forward. And so if you look at your entire system, delivery from those central plants that I first talked about, and the lines and wires, and then moving towards the commercial and residential systems, ultimately, in the old days, it went one way. You had power flowing from this side, from the central systems, across transmission lines to the substation, to the homes, and to the businesses. Now it's going to start going both ways, and it needs to go both ways, because these things, that is, our homes and businesses, now are really energy resource assets, distributed energy resources that can provide for the system and provide benefits to the entire system if we set up the system properly. And that's what we like to do. That's what really Solar City is trying to achieve, is trying to work with the utility companies and work with the other stakeholders, the homeowners, and the businesses to ensure that we can have this integrated system that works for everybody. We're doing that, for example, we entered into an agreement with the utilities in New York State. That was an agreement, a collaborative one that we hammered out over a 4-month period that was initiated by the governor's office there and by the head of the Public Utilities Commission. We got together, Solar City and several other solar companies sat down with Consolidated Edison out of Manhattan, and then a number of other utilities, Niagara Mohawk and others, and came to an agreement that we figured out how to, in essence, keep net metering in place for over a period of time, but transition to a period where we're actually looking at the value, the benefits rather, the benefits and costs of solar, and move to that over a 3.5-year period. It was a groundbreaking agreement that we did in New York. We hope we can replicate that agreement in other states as well, so we can have rational policies in place to ensure that consumers have choice. And so with that, I'm going to give it up. I'm going to give it up and over to Ryan Hanley, who is a vice president with Solar City and the primary author of a study that I think you're all going to be very interested in. Thank you all very much.
Good morning. excited to be here, a great crowd. As John mentioned, my task here is to do a quick primer on the paper that you all have in your hands. So we'll walk through pretty quickly what we did, why we did it, what are the insights, and then why are those insights important for Nevada as well as across the country. And I want to start with a couple thank yous. As John mentioned, my group at Solar City, my group and I were part of the co-authors of this paper. The other half of the paper is our colleagues over at NRDC. I want to thank explicitly Dylan Sullivan, who's our lead author from NRDC, and Noah Long is a champion of this paper on NRDC side. And Noah will be up on a panel here in a few minutes. I hope this is the beginning of a set of work that we continue to do together, so I appreciate that. So the paper itself, we'll do this quickly. If everyone has in their hands, let's open up onto page 1, and we're going to go line by line through this. It'll be a couple of hours, and it'll be great. There is a test. And in fact, there is a test. This might be construed as a homework assignment, this entire paper. We believe it's a homework assignment given the context of where we started here in Nevada. And this quote is one that comes from the Public Utilities Commission in Nevada in an order that they put out in December of last year. And I'll read it quickly. For other than the avoided energy and energy losses, line losses, there is insufficient time or data in this proceeding to assign a value to the other 9 variables, but other information can be vetted in future general rate cases. So what that is referring to is an analysis many of you are probably very familiar with, a cost-benefit analysis on the value of rooftop solar. It's a pretty common analysis in many states, in most states, and you do it in a fashion where you assess the cost and benefits of rooftop solar. And in December of last year, the PUCN identified a set of variables they wanted folks to look at and to perform this analysis. And that's where they mentioned these variables, these 11 variables. And for a variety of reasons, the analysis that was performed here in Nevada focused only on 2 of the variables, 2 of the benefits that rooftop solar provides, and as this quote identifies, left out the other 9 that are typical in analyses. And in fact, in the Brookings report that came out this morning that Robert mentioned, they did a survey of states across the country and broadly found, I would say, that most states do include a whole host of benefits. And notwithstanding the conclusion of that paper, they often turn out to be a net benefit. So we'll talk about that a little bit. But because of this statement, Solar City and NRDC took the task as a homework assignment to say, well, let's flesh this out. Let's do the analysis on the other 9 variables and see where we land. And does that start to be a reset? Hopefully, in our mind, it starts to be a reset in the conversation in Nevada to setting policy and having policy discussions. So this chart is the conclusion of this paper. And before I talk about that, let me talk about how we did this analysis. This is not the first analysis of its type in the country. It's not the first of its kind in Nevada. In fact, there are great examples preceding us that we get to borrow from. In particular, here in Nevada, there was an analysis done by an independent agency in 2014 that did exactly this. They performed this analysis on behalf of the PUCN, and they actually did it in concert with a multi-stakeholder working group that was providing a lot of input into how this should be performed. The great thing for us is that the tools they used are available to us. They had created spreadsheet models that really identified all the methodology. That's where we started in this paper. We borrow the tools that came before us and were done specific to Nevada. So that's step 1. We take those tools that were done a couple of years ago, we refresh all the data, we pull data from any data source that is relevant here in Nevada. Mostly we pull from the utilities data itself. So for general rate cases and things called integrated resource planning, filings, and our task was to refresh an analysis that was pretty good in 2014, refresh it for today, and see where we stand. And that's what we went line by line through with NRDC. And I also want to throw, I was remiss, I missed a couple of other thank yous at the beginning. On the 3rd page of the paper, you'll see logos from a handful of other institutes that did something that we call a peer review. A peer review sounds friendly. It's really grueling. They basically sat with us and destroyed all of our assumptions and our confidence over the course of about 3 weeks. But went through the data, made sure that they had trust or had confidence in the methodology we used in the data. And the institutes that put their stamp on this and said, yep, they followed a good process were some academics at Stanford University, Rocky Mountain Institute, Next Gen America, as well as Energy Innovation, an energy think tank. And so we really want to thank them for their support on this. After all that work, coming back to the conclusion, the task at hand here is to do two things. Calculate all the benefits that rooftop solar provides and subtract all the cost it takes to put these things in the ground. The answer to that math question is something that's called a net benefit or net cost. And many people have probably heard of the term cost shift. Has anybody heard cost shift right? So cost shift relates to this math equation. It's the result of what are the benefits versus what are the costs. If the costs are greater than the benefits, then you have a cost shift. You shift cost into other customers. And what we show in this analysis is that the opposite is true. If you can see the first bar here of benefits, we'll break this down in a little more detail shortly. You get a certain amount of benefits, you subtract the cost, and then at the end of the day we have the answer. And this, because in our analysis benefits are greater than cost, we have the opposite of a cost shift, or a net benefit. We do some other things where we get into some externalities or things like societal benefits that don't result in the utilities actually avoiding cost, but it benefits all of us in things like better air quality, less cost to health illnesses and things like that. But that's essentially the conclusion here, is that given the methodology we took, which was to use data and tools that were created by other people, using a methodology endorsed by the regulatory agency here in Nevada, performing this analysis to get to a net benefit. I won't spend a lot of time here, but I'll talk a little bit about the underpinnings behind this. And what we'll do is you guys can just read, maybe as a family tonight over dinner, you can read this collectively and go through all the, you can debate whether it's line losses are 0.4 cents per kilowatt hour or 0.3. My family loves that conversation in particular. My wife thinks it's 0.3. But we go through this. You can see, let's see if I have a pointer. Yeah, these are our 11 benefits categories. And once again, these were identified by the regulator here in Nevada. And we go through and we quantify them. And we show the methodology here. One thing that in particular will put you to sleep in this paper is we belabor all of our assumptions, the methodologies. There's an appendix that will put you to sleep in 3 seconds. It goes you step by step of how we did this. The reason is we want people to replicate this analysis because we think it's valid. And we think it, once again, is a reset for the discussion here in Nevada. And you're all probably aware of the context before. If I go back to this statement, what the conclusion was of this is, given that they didn't have enough time, they valued 2 of the benefits and they found that there was a cost shift, a big cost shift, and that solar was not paying its own way and actually was a detriment into Nevada. And that was one of the inputs that led to many of the policies that came out of that decision, things like lack of grandfathering and the change of rates. And we see an opportunity here. If we can start the conversation fresh and say, all right, we did have time to calculate all of these other ones, and we do show our work, can we start over? And can we have an honest conversation or an earnest conversation to say, do we make the right decisions? Should we revisit any of them and think about different policies that can start to get back to a sustainable market that John was showing in his growth slides in places like Hawaii. The other thing I'll say here is, once again, there are environmental benefits that we start to include here. In our paper, we elaborate on a whole list of additional benefits that we think are relevant. These are not the only 11 we think are valid, but they're a good start. And you can see, if you're interested, and read on some of the other ones, that folks like NRDC and Solar City are doing a lot of work, often with utilities, on trying to quantify all of these future benefits that we think are also valid. So with that, that's once again a starting point. We think this lends credence to the idea that there are benefits. We should start over. There's a lot of folks here from different policy venues that can probably talk about how do we start over and reset. And I think the panel will dive into a little bit of this. What can Nevada do if this is a foundation to build on? And with any luck, this becomes part of the background, and we start to say, let's look forward and recognize the benefits that many of us know intuitively to be there, and hopefully have a little bit of air coverage now to say the numbers also suggest that the benefits are here. So with that, thank you. I'm certainly here if anybody wants to get into the details of line losses. But I've been asked to say that we were going to go into a quick break so that we can set up the stage for the next panel discussion. So thank you all.